Hey everybody, welcome to Johnny Vlogs. I'm your host, Boba Fett. Okay, maybe not. See, I'm recording this on Sunday. I'm about to go out to see the new Star Wars movie. Really excited, so thought I had to rock the Boba Fett hat. And quite honestly, I don't think we've seen it on this channel since back in the days when this channel was called Geekin' Dorks. So last week we did a film review, and it was a very interesting topic that a lot of you commented on. It's about a film called Breaking the Cycle, and it's basically a comparison between a prison in Norway and a prison in New York, and the big differences. It's really kind of extreme differences between those two prison systems. So I mentioned on that Itchy Mysteries review that I wanted to possibly talk about that more because I was still really struggling with the questions that film left me with, which I think is really fine work. The filmmakers did a really good job. One of them even commented in the thread as well. So I want to spend some time talking about that today. But before we get into that, of course, we have to thank people that are helping to keep me here, my awesome supporters via PayPal or Patreon. If you want to support through Patreon, there's a link in the description box below. If you want to support through PayPal, you can always send it to me at john@lordandarts.com, and that's John, John. First of all, I want to thank James Reed for making another contribution. He's a very regular contributor through PayPal, and I really appreciate that. In terms of Patreon, we have new pledges. That is Shannon Peter Schmidt Olmos and Bella Berenice are both new pledges. Thank you so much for helping to support the channel. And on top of that, many people edited their pledge. We had a little bit of a scare over the past couple of weeks with Patreon. They talked about they were possibly going to change their fee structure and charge more to the people that are trying to donate on Patreon, which I know myself and a bunch of other creators didn't really agree with. Luckily, they reversed all that. They're not making those fee changes. But I think because of that, there was a lot of people that were Patreon supporters that increased their pledge. And I just want to thank you guys so much. That really means a lot to me. Liz Marina, Morgan, Courtney A. Jenkins, Matt Bishop, Green Bean Sprout, and Barb Riffy, aka Gully, all increased their pledges. Thank you so much, guys. It really means the world to me to have that support from you. With all that being out of the way, let's now get to the conversation. So what I've done is I went through the comments. I've highlighted several that I want to share with you guys, kind of talking about both sides of this. There's many there's many sides to all of this. So I'm going to just read some comments and kind of tell you my thoughts as we're going through them. So here is my YouTube comment page specifically for that video, Itchy Mysteries, Breaking the Cycle. Abyss Cove stated, in Sweden, where I live, lots of homeless people commit a crime to get to prison during the 6 cold months. It's like a vacation. That is certainly part of the problem when we're talking about adjusting the system, especially if we're going to try to move to something closer to what we saw in the example from Norway. If the environment is too nice there, it could be abused. And, you know, when you consider that homeless people are facing being out in 6 months of cold. I mean, I live in Minnesota right now. There's at least, 6 or 8 inches of snow kind of packed on the ground. In these areas where we have extreme weather like that, I do think that there is a tendency for this type of abuse to possibly happen. Is the trade-off worth it, I think, is the bigger question. The main problem that I see with this conversation is there's people that are at the start, kind of the beginning thoughts of this conversation, where there's a very simple view of, look, these people did something wrong. They have to pay for it. They should be in an environment that lets them know on a minute-to-minute basis that they're paying for what they did. And I get that. The problem is, if you run it through, there's another side to this conversation about what happens when they get released. We're not talking about people that are necessarily staying in prison for life. We're talking about people that are serving some type of prison term. And then when they get out, what's going to happen? Are they going to reoffend? Have we let someone out that is now going to go and harm someone else and then get back into the system? So that's kind of the bigger overarching question in all of this that I'm still struggling with, guys. I don't have the answers to this. This is why I talked about this film. This is why I asked for your opinions. And by the way, this is an amazing thread to read. I really appreciate everyone that commented on this thread. A lot of good back and forth, a lot of really good discussion that was happening in this thread. So, and here, James Reed, I think we just mentioned him. Difficult balance to make. There is a culture of people committing crimes in the UK just to get into prison because their life is so much better inside. I do think UK prisons do give too much freedom to the prisoners who are there for punishment, not to play Xbox or spend the day in the gym. Just my opinion, though. That raises a very interesting point, James, and a lot of other people kind of hit this point as well. There is a thought that because I think it comes from the fact that when they're in prison, they're not necessarily working a job, that some people think that it's easier to be in prison because they don't have that responsibility. They don't have to go every day and spend 8, 10, 12 hours at this job and then come home and they just have a little time for, I mean, if you're working a job, you can't spend all day playing Xbox or, pumping iron at the gym. You're lucky to get an hour or two for each of those things on a daily basis. So I totally understand that as well. I don't want prisoners sitting in jail playing Xbox, and I don't think that that is necessarily a good tool for developing what I'm talking about, which is some way for them to re-enter society in a way where they're going to be a better contributor than they were when they got to prison. And that kind of raises an interesting thought in my mind, because I know there's a mentality that I see in the comments here about almost like they want these guys in jail and they just want them in jail forever, and that's that. Almost like they want them gone. And in some cases, if we're talking obviously about someone that's been murdered or, guys that do horrible things to children, things like that, I know that that's the belief. We want those people gone. But a prison sentence of 10 or even 20 years doesn't really get rid of that person. It takes them out of play for a matter of time. If there was an opportunity while they were out of society to really get rid of that bad part of the person, should we take advantage of that or not? And I think that's kind of the bigger question I'm trying to drive towards on this. What if we could eradicate in some way the bad part of that person and turn them back, release them back in society in a meaningful way after they've served their time? They were given a fair sentence, they served their time, and hopefully re-enter society and be something different than they were before. Because I think what we're seeing here, especially in the US, is a lot of repeat offenders. You look at their history and they're just doing the same thing over and over and over. They get out of prison, they commit the same type of crime, they go back into prison, they get out, they do the same crime. It's just this endless loop. So in terms of them being corrected in any way, that's really not happening. Ashley Schaefer says, the way I see it, you can't treat someone like a caged animal, a neglected and abused caged animal at that, for years, and then one day release them into society and expect them to know how to live as anything other than a neglected, abused animal. And that puts us in a bit of a different realm, because at that point I'm wondering, are they coming out maybe even worse than they were going in? The thing that really bothered me was I thought about the footage that I was seeing, particularly of the inmates at Attica. I think the thing that disturbs me the most is the fact that prisoners can't use a toilet without being seen by someone. I mean, just the next time you're sitting on your toilet, think about it. Think about some stranger, not a family member, some stranger just walking by and looking in on what you're doing. And I truly believe there is some fix to that. There is some technology there, maybe building just a little half wall, maybe, I know they have these materials now that are like glass, but when you electrify it, it kind of whites out so you can't see what's exactly behind it. Maybe something along those lines, just something that's a little bit more humane in terms of just some type of privacy for them when they're using the bathroom. I think that would at least be a very small step in the right direction, just in terms of treating them more like a human. And then maybe they're going to be able to build up some form of self-respect. I mean, that's really, if all their respect is completely shot and it's all taken away on a second-to-second basis, how can we expect them to ever move out of that and to ever understand that they could be something different? I don't know. Going down to Crystal Lioness, the more prison systems become privately run, the more they don't want to rehabilitate people. We have to take a deep look at our society and figure out why there is so much violence. Certainly, that reminded me of another film I saw called Kids for Cash, which had a really interesting situation going on. It kind of ties into privatized systems, but specifically for juveniles. This is a problem that you guys brought up multiple times. I don't know the solution to that. It's a really tough problem. And in terms of what I believe in business, I don't know that it's the best thing for these to be privately run organizations. But then you look at our government run organizations, and I don't know that those are really the most optimal solution either. Just another aspect to this that's a really tough part of this puzzle to crack. Thomas Lind, he is, I believe he's a producer, maybe one of the two directors, but he is commenting here as well. I'm very happy that the doc seems to give a lot of people a new perspective and makes you think about the purpose of a prison. And I think he's really nailing it, particularly for me. It made me think about the whole thing, because especially on this channel, we really talk about the front end of that process. You know, we look at crimes, we want justice to be served, the sentence is handed, we get them into prison, and then I feel the same way. I think that a lot of you do. I want to forget about him. People like Todd Colehep, I want him just gone. I don't want to ever have to think about that guy again. Thankfully, in that case, we know he's not getting out. But in many of these cases, that's not the type of sentence that we're looking at. We're looking at a finite period of time. So if that's the case, what can we do to change that person? Is there something that we can do, I guess, is really the question. And if there is, shouldn't we be taking steps towards that? Thomas, thank you so much, both for working so hard on this film and for adding to the commentary here. I really appreciate it. And I think it might be Tomas, actually. So if I got that wrong, my apologies. Lisa Comstock, honestly, you're in prison for a reason. Yeah, don't treat them like animals, but they don't get to play games and get to wander around and so on. I didn't murder anyone. I didn't hurt or rob anyone, yet I work every day and struggle to get by like a lot of society. She hits a couple notes for me. First of all, kind of what I mentioned earlier about, I think some people, and I know I felt like this when I was working a day job, particularly if it was a day job that I really didn't like. Some people feel like their personal lives can be a bit like a prison. And if you're working a job that you really don't appreciate and you're not appreciated in, it can feel really, really bad. And then when you compare your situation to some guy and think about him being in some kind of nice dorm room and having an Xbox and just hanging out all day, you know, maybe writing music or writing a book or reading books and all that, I get it. I get that there's a thing there. For people in that situation, I would say do your best to get out of that situation. If you really feel like you are imprisoned by your job in any way, and I know this is a bit off topic, but if you can make a comparison between your life because of your job specifically and people in prison, probably means that you need a change in your life. And I really hope that you'll reach for that. I know it's extremely tough. I worked a long time. It took me a really long time to figure out how to do this, even how to get to this point where I could free myself up and get out of that day-to-day grind so I could do something like I'm doing now. But back to the topic. One of the things that really bothered me about the Norway prison was the music studio. And it's not that I don't think that, sorry, I just had a cat hiss in the background somewhere. I guess I should announce, we do have a new cat in the house now. I know I had a video about Gary passing. We have now adopted Lila. Here's a quick little photo of Lila. She was a mother on the streets of St. Paul. All of her kitties got adopted away. She was kind of stuck, and we decided to save her. So she's now part of our family, and I think she's terrorizing Shelby, if I hear right. But sorry, guys, little divergence. Back to the topic. I didn't like the music studio because, and it's not that I don't think music doesn't have a place in prisons. I think, give them a guitar, sure, if they want to tool around on a guitar or something like that. But the music studio, having that type of work, is that really relatable in society for the majority of society? How many people are actually going to be able to then take that experience, get out of jail and say, oh, I'm going to go be a producer, or I'm going to be a board op, I'm going to go work at this music studio? That just the number of opportunities to do that type of work is really, it's not non-existent, admittedly, but it's not the same as the other example they had where they had people open a restaurant. Now, sure, the guys that are opening the restaurant, running a business, that could be good experience. That applies to many other businesses when they get out. But they also had people that were working under them as servers, as cooks. All that stuff is very relatable, very easy for them to transfer that skill set. So the music studio kind of hit me weird. I still am struggling with that one. And I'm definitely with you guys. I don't want this mentality of, hey, I wake up, I go work out for an hour, then I go to the music studio. I work at the music studio for 4 or 6 hours. I made an album. Then I went, back to my cell, played some Xbox. Oh, first I went and hung out with my buddies at lunch. I get it. I do think there needs to be some type of program built in there that resembles what it's really like to be in society. And if you take away that main responsibility of them working some type of job, a job is a bit different than going and spending time in the music studio. But if that component is in there, I think it can be helpful. And I know, in the U.S. prison systems, we have people that work their way up and they're able to work in the library or work in the laundry room, things like that. I think that more could be done in those types of programs. And maybe people that are closer to getting out, maybe there should be some type of time thing built into this where, 2 years before you're supposed to be released, all of a sudden you're eligible for a bunch of these programs that are going to help reintegrate you into society. Maybe something along those lines. I do think there's some aspect to thinking about it as some type of program prior to their release that might help this conversation move forward a bit, particularly here in the U.S., as opposed to, hey, let's just give them all this rad stuff to do the whole time they're in prison. Princess Noni76, or Nani. Hi, John. I live in the UK and was talking to a guy this week who is a registered sex offender and has served time in UK prisons. Inside, he was able to use the gym daily, develop a trade, had his own cell and study. He was made to attend rehabilitation classes, but said what he knew they wanted to hear. He kept his head down and only served 2.5 years of a 5-year sentence. He admitted prison wasn't bad and that he would probably end up back inside for the same crime. Once again, what we've talked about earlier. Not only this, but he made friends with other sex offenders, which in my mind can only be a dangerous thing. This isn't rehabilitation, nor can it be justice for the victims. Major point there. Absolutely. And the film even touched on this a little bit too. What if you are a family member of someone that has been victimized? Do you really want to see a prisoner, someone that has harmed you or your family in some way, be given these opportunities? And I think that's the answer to that is different for different people. I think there's some people that would say, no, I want them to be in prison forever. I want them to rot in there. There are other people that see outside of that and they say, if there's a way that this can change this person so that they're not the same person anymore, essentially like I was talking about earlier, to truly get rid of whatever was evil within that person by changing them in some way, I think some people might take that option. I don't know. Outside of that, once again, the rehabilitation classes being abused by someone, I think you're always going to find examples of that. The question is, what about the people that could legitimately learn from that? I'm sure he wasn't the only person in that class. Was there other people in that class that were really picking up something that might change them for the better before they're released? I think you're always going to have this. You're always going to be able to point at examples and say, well, this guy in particular, he just told them what they wanted to hear so he can get through this. I totally understand that. Quite honestly, I feel like I did that a bit in terms of my schooling. But there was other examples where certainly I know other people in the class were learning something, even if I didn't agree with it. Or in other classes, I was picking stuff up that maybe other people were just paying lip service to. So it's really about the opportunity, I think. I don't know that our inmates have a lot of opportunity for making these types of change. And Laura, I think it's Whiting, Lori makes a point here. You cannot help people who won't help themselves, and you can't change people who do not want to change. Those are absolutely true. The question I'm trying to raise is, if someone doesn't have the opportunity at all, will they make a change? And I think that's a pretty easy question to answer. If they don't have the opportunity to change, no. If they don't have the services available to them, if they don't have any road that they can take to lead them out of where they're at, then obviously they're not going to change. So do we start building some opportunities? Do we start looking at some ways to build them those types of roads? I think that's really what this film is asking. Missing Mom Shannon, longtime supporter of the channel. Honestly, John, I think maybe somewhere in between the two extremes. If it's a lesser offender, I can see something like this. Murderers, traffickers, rapists, and child abusers / killers should not get the same treatment. Once again, I agree. And that's why I'm saying maybe a program that is time triggered in terms of the release of them, and maybe only certain types of people are eligible for that program. I think that there's something to that, but I can't tell you guys how often I see sentences, particularly for murderers, that I think are like, how is this guy getting out in 10 years? Or, they give him a 20-year sentence and they're released in 12 because of good behavior and stuff. If they're still being turned out within a reasonable time frame that they're going to be able to reoffend, shouldn't we be trying to do something to stop that from happening? I don't know. I think that's all the comments I had highlighted. But once again, thank you to everyone for contributing to this conversation. My brain is still stuck on this topic. I think there's something very important that the film is highlighting. Obviously, a lot of you were moved by it too. And once again, I just got to tell you guys, I love when I read a thread like this with a bunch of great conversation. I love the passion that all of you put into this. And I appreciate that you guys are looking at this film and asking some of those questions of yourself and then sharing what you thought about it here with me. Really appreciate that. Take care, everyone. I will see you back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arch channel.